You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Fast ship. Never heard of the William Paul?
Should I have?
It's the ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
What a piece of junk!
Covering Star Wars vehicles in less than 12 parsecs, this is Start Your Engines.
Don't get technical with me.
Here are your hosts, Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold.
You're listening to Start Your Engines. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who fixes hyperdrives for a living. It's Paul Naylor. How you doing, man?
Can't fix them very well, unfortunately.
Oh, well, we've all got talents, and maybe that's not one of yours.
Well, certainly sounds aren't.
How's it going?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. How are you? So we're actually doing this one in person. The last few we've done over Zoom, so it's actually quite nice to be in the same room doing
Nobody
this.
knows that literally right now I am touching you, Paul.
Ooh.
Podcasting.
That was an amazing moment.
Hey, electric. Today we are talking about the Incom Corporation T-47. Most people will be familiar with the refit from Hoth from The Empire Strikes Back, the Snowspeeder, but there are numerous, more than one, versions of this vehicle refitted for different locations. What would you say, looking back to the era of Empire Strikes Back, what do you think the first time you saw the Snowspeeder was?
I loved it from the off. I mean, it was one of those things that you thought, this is cool.
Yeah.
It seemed to be able to do a bit more than a land speeder could, because obviously it can go up in the air, as we've seen in several occasions now.
Yeah.
But aesthetically as well, it was very cool, wasn't it? The fact that you'd got the gunner position facing the other way.
Yeah.
And you got the pilot in position. But it looked like, if you were to compare it to a sports car, it had got more of a sort of a Lamborghini kind of feel than the land speeder had.
Yeah.
Very low, very angular. I loved it, yeah.
That's a great analogy, actually, because when you look at the vehicle, it's all hard edges. And there's no smooth bits on it.
No, and I think we were fairly used to some sort of smoothest edges on anything that was sort of land related. And I suppose because it was on Hoth the first time we saw it, we kind of thought of it as a land vehicle in many ways. You wouldn't expect it to go off out into space. But the land speeder got very smooth edges to it. This was something else. And I think for a long, long time, we only ever really associated it as the Snowspeeder.
Oh, totally.
I can't think of many vehicles that have had multiple sort of facades, shall we say. I suppose in later years, the Endor speeder bike, and then obviously we've seen versions of them in The Mandalorian that were very similar to what we saw on Endor. But this vehicle, more than any other, has got various guises, be that in literature, toys even.
Definitely, yeah.
A multiple personality vehicle, shall we say.
I mean, you see the AT-AT on Hoth in Empire, and you see it on Endor in the forests, and you know it was stomping around the deserts of Jakku because you see a crashed one in Force Awakens. But you do get the definite sense that they didn't refit that thing for any... Anyway, it was what it was, wasn't it? Speeder bike, like you say, you would imagine you'd have to retrofit a speeder bike to work well in this.
Particularly in the snow, they give it a different colour as well, different colour scheme to disguise it in the snow.
Well, Jazzwares released one with the AT-AT set. You've got the white speeder bike.
And even with the Galactic Heroes, you've got a little white version of the speeder bike to go with it, yeah.
But with this... With the Snowspeeder, like you say, because it's kind of like the Ford Escort of Star Wars, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that mid-range vehicle, mid-sized vehicle. It's not a huge thing. It's obviously difficult to retrofit it or refit it for Hoth. You see that in the film. They're struggling to make it work.
They comment on it, don't they?
Yeah.
We're having trouble adapting the speeders to the snow.
That's to the cold. And it's tough enough for Tauntauns, and they live there.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to fit an air vehicle like that. It's a brilliant vehicle. It's in one of the greatest action sequences, not just in Star Wars, but in all of cinema. Yeah. I would say the Battle of Hoth is top tier.
Putting that at the beginning of a film rather than the conclusion was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
One of the greatest battles in film history, I would say.
Completely. Now, let's dig into the details of this vessel a little bit.
Manufacturer.
You'll be pleased to know it wasn't built by Corellian Engineering.
Hooray!
It was actually manufactured by Incom Corporation.
Model and class.
It's a modified T-47 Airspeeder. We're talking about the Snowspeeder now. Modified T-47 Airspeeder. And to buy one brand new would be 50,000 credits, but it says here that is black market only. So I wonder what other organisations would have access to the Snowspeeder, because only the Empire fly TIE fighters. Really, only the Rebellion and the Resistance fly X-wings.
Yeah.
So, it makes you think this was built specifically for these purposes.
It is weird that happens, though, isn't it? That one vehicle type belongs to the Empire, one vehicle type belongs to the Alliance.
Yeah.
You don't get good and bad guys driving around in Fiestas. Or do you?
Good point. Good point. Can you imagine if Star Tours had a Star Destroyer? It'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Adrian Rawlins, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Technical specifications,
5.3 metres in length. So it's not huge.
No.
What's that, about 15 foot?
Yeah.
maximum atmospheric speed,
1,100 kilometres an hour at full whack, but at combat speed, 600 kilometres an hour. So it can clip along, it can move at a fair pace.
Yeah.
Maximum altitude, which is something you kind of referred to a moment ago, 250 metres.
Yeah, fair height.
A fair height.
But it's never going to leave the atmosphere and go off into space.
And again, it brings you into that classification of ships like Skyhoppers, like land speeders and speeder boats. They have defined flight ceilings.
But although 250 metres is a fair distance, yeah.
engine specs,
Engine units, it has two Caridi KD49 repulsor lift drive units, two Incom Corporation 5i2 high-powered iron drive afterburners. So afterburners tells you it's got a bit of a kick, it can move. When you see it in Empire, you know that they've come up with a plan. That armour's too strong for blasters, which kind of, as an audience, tells you this is a fairly new vehicle. Yeah. It tells you that these guys haven't really encountered AT-ATs before, and they're malleable enough as pilots to figure out another route around it, which I think, if I remember, is Wedge coming up with the idea for the harpoon.
Yep, they recognised what the vehicles were through their macro binoculars, but like you say, they may not have come into contact with them before. And yes, it was Wedge that said, go for them with the tow cable. So the tow cable saved the day.
It did.
A little bit of rope.
A little bit of rope. And also on the Palatoy Snowspeeder, which had that little bit of thread
Tiny
at the back.
bit of string.
You just sort of wrap around something, and was just amazing. And so many things. I mean, when you think back to, we used Luke X-Wing as our Snowspeeder pilot back in the day. There is now a retro-style Snowspeeder pilot, which would have been so cool to have back then, and would have been such an easy deco change to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If you think about it. But when you bought the Rebel Survival Kit, and you got the little belt with the hook on it, which was just fantastic.
Well, prior to that, on the Palatoy Kenner version, you'd got that little block that detached from the back of the tow cable. Yeah. On the AT-AT, where you've got that small opening in the side panel, I would thread it through there, anchor it to that, and then have Luke holding on to that. That was his way of doing that scene from the film. Yeah.
Which was such a good scene.
Yeah.
Such a good scene.
And it was a great toy as well. The Snowspeeder, the Palatoy Kenner Snowspeeder, not only did the cannons light up and flash, but the noise was great as well.
Yeah, it was one of the earliest ones.
It was one of the earliest ones that had something that sounded approximating a realistic sort of blaster sound.
Yeah.
Great ship.
And also, I think, if we think about the dimensions that we've just described, I would say that Snowspeeder is pretty
reasonably accurate.
Fairly close. I mean, it's smaller than a full-size Snowspeeder, but not far off. Great minds.
armament,
2 MK4ES laser cannons, or you could refit it for different circumstances. One, you're going to love this, one Corellian Engineering Corporation AP11 double laser cannon, or 2 X2100 laser cannons. So you can swap it out for different circumstances. One MK1ES power harpoon, which is what we've just spoken about, or one Ubrikian transport MODK power harpoon. So
Ubrikian.
Can't be the Ubrikian.
Can't be the Ubrikian.
So the harpoon, given that you've got the capability to swap it out for different things, it definitely makes you realise that the harpoon element is very important, and how smart of it was for Wedge to think of it in that moment.
So that back portion of it, I suppose, is like the Swiss Army knife of speeders. They can do all sorts of little add-ons to it,
But don't you think now, when these details were being built up across various media, so obviously all this information we're going through wasn't just designed for Empire, it's been added on through role-play stuff, through books and comics and stuff, that you realise now, so many of the vehicles have this utility aspect that a YT-1300 doesn't just have to be a smuggling ship. It can tow vessels. It can be used to transport cargo in a professional sense, as opposed to a smuggler sort of fitting one out as a hot rod.
Absolutely.
Or something like a Snowspeeder here, or a T-47 Airspeeder, we should say. You can use it for various different missions.
Yeah. I mean, and that was hinted at in the never made but often seen as a photographed toy. It was a sand speeder.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it was basically the T-47 decked out in like an orangey brown colour. Yeah. And it had got different bits on it as well. So it got those hinted at modifications. It didn't look exactly like a Snowspeeder. At a glance it did, but they'd done things to it that were different. Like the literature says, the T-47 had got a number of modifications that would be specific to its terrain. Very
I mean,
cool.
I remember you saying about that one of those toys that never was sort of thing, and there's plenty of them out there.
Yeah.
In the Marvel comics, when they did Between Empire and Jedi, when they went to Ardra,
Yeah.
and you see a scene there when they're sort of trekking through the jungle, and you see an airspeeder, and it's like, that's a snowspeeder.
Yeah.
That's the first time I remember ever seeing it not a
being used in the
snowspeeder.
snow, yeah. I either have never seen that or it's drifted from memory, but that phase between Empire and Jedi in the Star Wars comics
The best.
was great, but I always lamented the loss of Han Solo.
Yes.
And so for me, I never engaged with that as much as I did as the continuation between Star Wars and Empire.
Yeah.
At the time, now I could go back and I could read it now, but at the time it was sort of like, I want Han.
It's weird though, because Han Solo was and probably still is my favourite Star Wars character.
Yeah.
Han and Lando are the guys I gravitate to.
Yeah.
Their stories and adventures. And yet Empire to Jedi is my favourite period of Star Wars history. In real life, as a kid waiting for Jedi, because the anticipation for that was just ridiculous.
But we didn't really know whether or not Han Solo was going to return.
I don't think Luke still knew till about 1981.
They didn't. And I think that was, whilst it never put me off Star Wars at all, I found it difficult to read a story where the focus was maybe Luke, Lando and Leia rather than Luke, Han and Leia.
Yeah.
Because to me at that time, Lando was still a traitor.
Oh, he's the bad guy.
He was the bad guy that had managed to wheedle his way in with everybody else. And I hated him. I hated him for a while. I don't hate him now.
No, we understand the predicament now, don't we?
But he had his redemption on film.
Oh, he really did.
Anyway, we digress.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark fanthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
We see the airspeeder in Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes.
But when you look at the snowspeeder, crew 2.
Yeah.
Now, Han and Luke being rescued by Zev Seneska on the plains of Hoth. Han's waving, even though it's not Harrison Ford, it's somebody else. And Luke's still stuffed inside the Tauntaun. And Zev comes in. And as you mentioned before we started recording, very logical thought process is that he just calls another speeder
Off
out.
screen, yeah. Because there's a swipe then to the next scene in the back to tank.
That's it. So we don't need to see
we
that.
don't need to see.
Not an important scene to see.
So that wouldn't be one ship. Now, however, in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, when it's just an airspeeder, if you like, when they come to rescue Obi-Wan and Leia, so 2 speeders arrive. Now, luckily, Obi-Wan and Leia get in the same one because the other speeder does get shot out of the sky.
He does.
Really speaking, that would have been quite a tight fit. Luckily, Leia was little Leia.
That's true. That's true. I mean, she never got to be particularly big Leia.
That's true.
And if we'd have escaped from Jabba's palace in a speeder, an airspeeder, I would say Bagsy the backseat. But that's just me.
Put it this way, me and you in one of those would be reasonably uncomfortable.
It would not take off, mate. You know it.
It's now a land speeder.
Well, put it this way.
Cargo capacity.
It has a cargo capacity of 10 kilograms.
That's not a lot.
That's my calf. So I don't think we're taking off. If we're
I didn't even know you owned cattle.
Affiliations.
It's a combat airspeeder, and its affiliation, as we know, is the Alliance to Restore the Republic, or previously the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah.
So that makes all the sense. It's not a vehicle that you're probably not going to see outside of military use.
No.
It feels like that was where they were gunning for.
It's just been modified for its potential in battle, albeit ground skirmishes like we had on Hoth. It's not something that you would traditionally use as a fighting vehicle. It's more of a scout ship, I would say.
Patrol vehicle.
Patrol vehicle,
Yeah.
It's just interesting to see it being used in so many different contexts. But for me, I would class it more as a patrol vehicle.
Vehicle usages.
As well as being a snowspeeder, it also has been fitted out as a sand speeder, obviously for desert conditions, a swamp speeder for, believe it or not, swampy environments, a sky speeder for high altitude environments. Now, it doesn't give much detail on what that flight ceiling is, but I would imagine if you fit one out for high altitude environments, it puts it more in the class of a twin pod cloud car, doesn't it?
Yes,
Which can clearly fly at great altitude.
Yes, and I would say that's probably its closest sort of comparison.
Yeah.
That's a good thought. Yeah, the twin pod cloud car. But whether or not that hints at it being able to be modified
Even
to go higher.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's not escaping the atmosphere.
No.
I don't think the cabin, the cockpit is fitted for that at all. It's pretty tight. It's compact.
Even
you wouldn't want to travel anywhere in that, would you?
Even in the Family Guy version, where Dak says he could take on the whole Empire alone and does go into space and promptly gets wiped out. I don't think that was real.
No, I think you're right, weirdly. Also, the Airspeeder. Now, Hydrospears Corporation's Combat Airspeeder, aquatic design based on the T-47 Airspeeder. It's part of the modification packages from Hydrosphere. The company's design team, Beta, took the Incom design and made it aquatic. Now, I don't know whether that means it could go underwater,
Or
like a
just skim
bongo,
the top.
or skim the water.
Yep.
My head tells me probably the latter.
Yes, I think it would probably be able to sort of, like a hovercraft or something like
Yeah,
that.
and then finally the last design, the last sort of modification was the T-47 Light Airspeeder. 18,000 credits if you want to buy it. Feels to me like that is the patrol vessel. That's the lightest, least armoured, because a Snowspeeder's got some heavy armour.
So is that the same dimensions, or would that be similar to that version that came out? Was it Power of the Force, where they brought it out as like a mini rig kind of thing?
Well, that's interesting, yeah. It doesn't say, but my head tells me that it would be the same.
Standard dimensions,
But that goes back to Obi-Wan Kenobi, when you see the Airspeeder. Because when you see that Airspeeder, it looks really small and compact.
Yeah.
And yet actually, when you look at a Snowspeeder, for example, when it's sat down, and maybe the Snowspeeder has more shielding, it's going to be tougher to get up in the air in cold than heat.
Hi, this is John Morton from The Empire Strikes Back, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
It's one of my favourite ships. It's got that familiarity to it. You could see it sat next to an X-Wing in a hangar, no problem.
Yeah.
But then it also looked quite different.
But don't you think, and just again a little tangent, but the look of that ship and how cool that vehicle was. Empire comes out, Palatoy and Kenner put out the Snowspeeder.
Yeah.
Airfix put out the little sort of 1 inch long Snowspeeders on that beautiful Hoth diorama they could get with the AT-ATs.
Yeah.
Palatoy put out the die-cast Snowspeeder, which is a very attractive vessel.
Yeah.
And then throughout specifically the 90s, when you start getting into all the other licensees coming in.
Micro Machines.
Galoob are doing Micro Machines, and there's other stuff, and Hasbro's starting to do, or Ken originally starting to do, reissues. When you think back to, pick a year, 1981, we're 10 or 11 years old at the time, give or take, and we're playing with our toys, and if you've got a brother or a sister or who's into Star Wars, there's a Falcon, there's an AT-AT, there's a Snowspeeder, there's an X-Wing, there's a TIE Fighter, whatever. There's Slave One. And this is why I still think Empire is the film that made Star Wars more than any other film. The addition of, and I've just said them, Snowspeeder, Twin Pod,
Slave One,
those vessels added into the mix, just made that range of toys, and with it,
just broadened it massively, didn't
completely.
It? Yeah, and all of a sudden you were getting vehicles like Slave One that had got no political affiliation with Rebels or the Empire, and to a certain extent the Twin Pod car as well.
Yeah.
Whereas the Snowspeeder, quite clearly a classic Rebel ship.
And even the mini rigs, when you had AST-5, which came out in the Jedi range, that's still my favourite mini rig.
Yeah.
Because when you sort of lengthened it out,
is that the orangey brown?
The orangey brown one. You could click it, so you could almost hold it like a handle.
Yes, yeah.
But actually, when you lengthened it out, it had that A-wing kind of vibe about it. But it was clearly not a Rebel ship. Just vehicles like that were just so cool. That as a vessel, I mean, it's a mini rig, so of course it's a smaller version of the real thing, like the little mini ISP, the little Imperial shuttle vehicle, and the sail barge, the mini sail barge. And
My
stuff.
favourite will always be MLC3. I love that, and that actually appeared in the Marvel comics.
But the Snowspeeder fit aesthetically and as a toy so well with all those other things.
Especially that first wave, the colour scheme was very similar.
Yeah.
It had got like a mushroomy sort of colour. One of my favourite versions of it, I've got the Jazzware Snowspeeder.
Same.
And that is beautiful.
It's insanely cool.
Yeah.
I managed to get the Hoth AT-AT, the Jazzware's AT-AT. So as I said, you get Snowspeeder bike, if you like, whatever they call it, with the figures.
Yep.
The AT-ST with that looks fantastic.
Yes.
They've released the Jedi version of the AT-ST, not the Empire version of the AT-ST, which has got the longer legs.
Yeah.
But the Snowspeeder, as you say, just looks perfect. I've got mine on display, and I've sort of set it up like it's crashed.
Yes.
Like Luke's trying to get out of it. And poor old Dak stuck in the back. Sorry, John. And because of in scale as well.
Yes.
It gives you a new perspective on what you saw in the film, because Jazzware's done such a good job of getting the scale right. Just fantastic.
I would love that AT-AT. But the Snowspeeder, the Jazzware's one, is one of my favourite things that they've done. Just because it just looks so great.
Yeah.
It really does.
So, final wrap-up, Snowspeeder. Airspeeders, we should say, but our heart's always going to go to the Snowspeeder.
Yeah.
in Empire, it made such an impact. We haven't seen it again on screen until Obi-Wan Kenobi, which was so cool to see it back again.
Yeah.
In that battle scene, in that moment, Lucas was brilliant with the team that he worked with in picking the right vehicles for the right moments.
Yeah.
That ship, it looked like something that would fly. When you see it in Echo Base, it looks like something that would fly.
Yes.
It feels like it could take up. I mean, you kind of see one go up, but you just know the forklift driver's like literally just out of shot. But nevertheless, it felt like that could go. And as a vehicle to capture the imagination, and especially as a kid in the UK, when you got to November, December, and it actually started to snow, and you took your AT-AT outside, you took all your rebel troops outside, and your snow troopers outside. You get your Wampa out, you get your Tauntaun, whichever one you've got, open belly or not, and you get them out there and start playing with them. That Snowspeeder was absolutely key to that. You know, those great times.
Probably be the thing that you would actually play with the most, because your AT-AT would be pretty stationary. So that would be the thing that you were flying around, getting loot, attacking it or whatever. So yeah, I do remember playing out in the snow with that. Happy days.
Happy days, happy days. And that's what Start Your Engines is all about. Thanks for listening to Start Your Engines. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com and be sure to comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fanthatracks. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fanthatracks intro and our Start Your Engines opening music, Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers, and of course, the data miners at Wikipedia. Remember to tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK time, 4 PM Eastern and 1 PM Pacific on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. And check out our Fanthatracks Radio Friday night rotation. It's every Friday night at 7 o'clock UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks, and every Tuesday at 7 o'clock UK time for your weekly episode of Making Tracks. I do treasure our time, Paul.
So do I, Mark.
Treasure our time.
It's always a pleasure, never a chore.
Exactly. Talking about all these wonderful vehicles. Don't know what we're going to talk about next. We'll have a little conflab and figure it out. Have you got ideas?
No.
Okay,
there's plenty out there, isn't there?
There's loads out there.
The tip of the Hoth iceberg we've touched.
We'll figure the next one out. We'll be back in a few weeks' time. But for now,
over and out.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.
We'll see you next week for...